You are listening to the Lichatchila River podcast.
מי מחזיק את האמת ביד ומי מחליט שהוא רק הנכון והצודק? מי נתן לנו את הבחירה לחיות ולהיות בצד שמחפש אמת? אני לא מחפש יותר, מתחיל מהסוף השאר כבר יסתדר.
Welcome to the Lichatchila River podcast. This is Chaim Kozliner. I am your host. Today, I'm very excited. We have a very special guest joining us tonight. World-renowned speaker, aka known as the tennis champion rabbi, a host of a popular podcast and WhatsApp broadcast of daily inspiration called The Daily Juice, and is currently right now the front lines of anti-Semitism with Chabad on campus, helping out the rabbi at Lawrence, Kansas. So we're gonna hear from him where is he from, what's his upbringing, how did he get there, a tennis, rabbi, shliach, how do these things come together? So Lev, take it away.
Wow. Thank you, first of all, for having me on this amazing show. I'm very thankful that I get to know the host, Chaim Kozliner. I've known him for many years, and his attitude of positivity and excitement has never changed. So I'm happy and honored to be on this show. And just to give a little bit of a background about myself, I'm originally from a very small town called Los Angeles, California. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and I grew up not religious, not observant, completely no real involvement in Judaism. And my life was pretty good growing up. I went to shul, I went to synagogue twice a year on the two big holidays, as we know, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And that was basically my entry and exit to Judaism. Entry and then exit 10 days later. And on Passover, we commemorated the holiday by putting a matzah on the table, although no one would eat it because it tasted like cardboard. But this was my Judaism growing up. At the same time, I was very successful in other things in life. Growing up, I was always one of the more academically successful students in my class. I graduated from middle school as a valedictorian, and then I graduated high school with high honors, which I'm sure that our listeners here know what a valedictorian is and high honors. But so when I graduated, obviously I was given a lot of different options and scholarships just for academics, and for the various, my SAT scores are very high. At the same time, I was also very successful at sports. From when I was a little child, from when I was already a child, 6 years old, I was playing any sport you could think of. My parents put me into baseball, basketball, soccer, football. I played any sport you could think of, and a lot of sports stuck. I was pretty good at baseball. I was actually on the all-star team for many, many years in baseball. And basketball I was also pretty good. But ultimately, the sport that I really started to embrace a lot was tennis. As Chaim said, that I'm officially known as the tennis rabbi. But I started embracing tennis. And from when I joined high school, I was right away became the varsity. I became one of the best players on the varsity tennis team, winning championships most of the years in high school. And it was a very great time, very successful at tennis. When I was 16 years old, I actually became the official Los Angeles City champion in tennis, which was with all the accolades that come with being the Los Angeles City champion, such as, being on the front cover of the Daily News and, being able to design my own shoe from Nike and all the other different various accolades. Do I still have it? Yes, I actually do. It's downstairs. But I have it here. But
okay, we gotta show it to that. We gotta bring it out after.
But I do have, so it was definitely a privilege and definitely a blessing for me and you can imagine parents. My parents are Russian, so they come from a Russian Russian family. All they want is for their kid to be able to brag that their son is smart and good at sports. So for me, the fact that I was good at tennis and the fact that I was good at good academically was the biggest nachas for them. And so that was my upbringing. That was their excitement. There was only one thing that really bothered my parents, which was my connection and involvement with Judaism. Growing up, like I said, I didn't really have much of a Jewish education. I officially was sent to a Hebrew school, which I actually did not attend. I ended up going to the local 7-Eleven across the street, most of the time. And so my parents were a little nervous that my lack of Judaism and my lack of care for Judaism was leading me to a very unhealthy place in terms of my connection and what could happen. And as we know, as many American parents, what really scares many American parents these days is the concept of intermarriage. Unfortunately, the most recent survey of intermarriages that was in 2017, and the survey said that 71% of Americans intermarry, of American Jews intermarry. And so my parents, that was really the only thing they cared about. They cared to make sure I wanted to marry a Jew and stay in the Jewish line. And anyway, so that was really their biggest concern, that I should marry Jewish. So they sent me off to a camp called CTeen Extreme, which I'm not sure who the viewers are or who the listeners are, but just to give a little bit of context, CTeen Extreme is a summer camp, the 2-week summer camp run by CTeen, which is basically a camp just doing a bunch of crazy stuff with public school high schoolers, such as whitewater rafting, zip lining, anything cool and crazy and fun that you could take public schoolers on is exactly what we did. I always joke around. A lot of the trips that they did, a lot of the activities we did were extremely dangerous. And the way I joke around about it is that they basically convince you that you're going to die, and if you don't pray to God, you're not going to live, and that's how they make you religious. But that's definitely it's a joke, obviously. But it was something that it was a camp that I really, really enjoyed, and I got heavily inspired by. And I came home ecstatic about Judaism. When I'll get back to this in a second, but when I came home, I really didn't know much. All I knew really was what I learned from CTeen, which is that I wear a yarmulke around every day, and I put on tefillin, and I wear tzitzis every day, and that I don't use my phone on Shabbat. That was all I got from the camp, and that was my inspiration. Just to share 2 things that really inspired me from CTeen when I was there. Number one is that when I was on CTeen, they as crazy as this sounds and as simple as this sounds, one of the things they taught us is that you could pray in English, which for me was a transformational piece of knowledge and understanding, because for me, one of my biggest issues with Judaism is that even if I wanted to connect to Judaism, I simply can't, because there is nothing that I could do to connect. Judaism is something which I can't feel, and I don't know Hebrew. When I was at Shul, they could have been saying "Ani rotze hamburgers," which is the literal translation of "I want hamburgers," and that would not make a difference to me. I would think that that's what it says in the Siddur, and so for me, learning that God could hear my language, God could hear the language that I want to talk to Him in, was a very pivotal moment in my life journey, and it really allowed me to start to connect, to find that there is a possibility, if I want, I could connect with God. And that was one transformative piece. And another piece was that when I came on CTeen, I made a lot of very real friends that I've never had before, based on living and growing up in a high school where everything is about girls and different things that happen in high schools. A lot of times you don't, a lot of your friends are superficial, especially when you're good at things and you're good at sports. You don't have friends that really care about you. Rather, when I went on CTeen, there was none of that. Everything was about just being Jewish, that we were all just 40 Jews thrown on a bus and told we couldn't leave for 2 weeks. And that itself brought a lot of companionship and brought a lot of friendship with amongst ourselves. And to this day, I am very, very close with many of my CTeen friends. Just a little piece of information that happened recently, about 1.5 years ago, is that I actually had the honor of setting up one of my CTeen friends who also became observant, setting him up with his current wife. And
Wow.
I had the honor of setting them up. And now, thank God, they have actually one son who's 6 months old. And it's amazing the friendships that are made and the long-lasting impact that I've seen from my connections with people that I made in CTeen. And so I'm hoping that he owes me one now. So I'm hoping that he's going to set up my kid. So, anyways, what got me into CTeen was literally nothing short of the word nothing. There was literally nothing that got me into CTeen. I was absolutely disinterested in Judaism. I really did not like participating in shul. My father used to try to drag me once a month to try to show up, and as you know, hopefully some magic would happen and I would get inspired. And there was none of that. So my parents ended up forcing me to go on CTeen. It was actually the first year that CTeen had ever done this trip, so they were quite desperate to get some people to come. And so my parents got a very large discount, and they wanted me to go with the hopes that I should at least enjoy being Jewish. Forget about becoming religious. And the rabbi told them before I went, your son? No way. There's no way your son's becoming religious. And to be honest, I probably would have agreed with him at that point. So that was kind of my journey to CTeen, how I got there, how I ended up getting to CTeen.
Yeah. So you said after, what was the second point you want to say after you got back? The second point you said
that after I came back from CTeen, it was not as rosy and as shiny and amazing as I thought it would be. When I came back from CTeen, my parents were nothing short of furious with me, and they were upset about the fact that I decided to take on too much Judaism and really, not just be excited about it, but do things about it and wear my kippah in public and start being more outwardly open about it, which I definitely understand the sentiment and the fear of being openly Jewish. I know many students here at KU, at the University of Kansas, when we made campaigns with the students to try to wear their kippahs in public, many students expressed a lot of fear. It's very scary to wear your kippah out in public. What are people going to say? What are people going to do? Are you making yourself a target? I remember that my grandmother, the day before I went to public school with my kippah on, she told me, make sure you don't get shot. And this is from my grandmother. Obviously, she's from the former Soviet Union, which over there, they were literally traumatized with persecution. So for her, persecution is a lot more real. Thank God we live in a country which overall is very respectful to the Jewish people and very loving and tries to promote peace amongst for Jews that want to practice what they would like to practice. But when I came back, like I said, my parents were very upset. My grandparents were even more upset. And I actually had a story with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but I'm not sure if that's where you want this podcast to go. So
yeah, sure, why not?
So this, I guess this podcast is called the Lechatchila River Podcast, which I'm sure that you've explained already in the introductions to this podcast, the Lechatchila River Podcast, that Lechatchila River means to just jump over challenges, to transcend the tide, to not sit and think about challenges, but to pull yourself out of your slavery, and not pull yourself out by sitting and pulling and ripping, but rather just putting yourself in a higher plane, taking yourself out and putting yourself in a higher plane that your challenges no longer exist. And when I was going through these challenges with my family, which I didn't understand at the time because I couldn't understand why they were upset at me for just doing something Jewish. I didn't, God forbid, go on drugs or get thrown into prison. I was simply trying to do what a good Jew does, and it upset them so much. And my grandfather at one point had told me that he never wants to speak to me the rest of my life, which was extremely, extremely rough for me. You can imagine what it's like for a 16-year-old child to find out that his grandfather never wants to speak to him ever again. And he's Russian, so he actually did it. So my grandfather used to come to my house and make as if I didn't exist, and he wouldn't speak to me. And eventually, it was very hard. I used to cry a lot. I spent many days in tears, calling friends, trying to get support. I really was in touch with my CTeen counselors, trying to get any sort of "you're doing the right thing" validation, etc. And so when a couple months later, about 6 months later, I went on this thing called the CTeen Shabbaton. The CTeen Shabbaton is kind of like a big, massive CTeen gathering with thousands of teens from all over the world in Crown Heights, in Brooklyn, in Manhattan. And we go visit Times Square, and there's a beautiful celebration in Times Square. And one of the things they did is they took us on Sunday, when we were visiting, they took us to the Ohel. They took us to the resting place of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And when we came to the Ohel, they told us, you're going to write now a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a very holy man, a tzaddik. You're going to write him a letter, and they said the Rebbe answers anything you ask for. That's what they said. That's what my counselor said. And so when I heard the Rebbe answers anything you ask for, I was like, wow, dude, where has this been my whole life, man? The Rebbe answers anything you ask for. Like, why is this dude not all over Instagram? Like, where's this genie, man? So anyways, I was very excited, and myself as a 16-year-old who had a lot of wishes in life, wrote down everything I wanted. I wanted a new Xbox. I wanted good grades. I wanted other things, anything I needed at the time. Maybe I think I even wrote at one point that I wanted a Slurpee. But I actually went after that to 7-Eleven and bought myself a Slurpee, considered it a present from the Rebbe. But so one of the things I wrote in my letter is with regards to my grandfather. I had completely given up on my relationship with my grandfather. I figured that it's over, it's lost. We're never going to be close again. And I simply wrote to the Rebbe asking that we should talk. Forget about being friends, forget about being close. And my grandfather, just to give some context, was kind of like my agent when it came to sports. He was always at all the tournaments I played. He was constantly, whenever I needed to go somewhere for a tournament, he would go. Whenever I needed new shoes or I needed new rackets or I needed to restring my rackets, my grandfather was the one taking care of it. He was like my sidekick, my sports agent. And when this happened, it really destroyed my entire relationship with him. And so I wrote this letter, and they told me, just like all the good Chabad rabbis do, that it doesn't work unless you take a resolution. But a few months went by, and as I was thinking about it, a couple months later, I was sitting and thinking about what happened, and I came to realize, and I was sitting contemplating, thinking about this letter that I'd written about 3 months before to the Rebbe. I was sitting and thinking about the fact of all the different things I had written to the Rebbe and kind of making a checklist. They told me everything you write to the Rebbe gets answered. So I started making a checklist, literally counting down piece by piece, what got answered and what didn't. And I was going through each one, and literally every single thing I'd asked for got answered. Every single thing except for one, my grandfather. My grandfather wanted to have nothing to do with me. He didn't want to have any part of my life. And he was simply just not interested. Not interested in me, not interested in anything that I was going through. And honestly, I was sitting there and thinking that this is a broken system. These guys, they lied to me. They told me everything you write to the Rebbe gets answered. Look, I just wrote something. It didn't get answered. And it's not like I didn't mean it. I meant it with a whole heart. I really wanted my grandfather to come close to me. And I remember writing about my success in tennis, which actually did come true. That's actually the year that I started putting on tefillin, was the year that I won my biggest accolades and my biggest tournaments in tennis. So I couldn't believe that my grandfather didn't get answered. And I was sitting there puzzled as how I could get scammed by all these Chabad people at the Ohel. And as I was sitting there thinking about this, 2 minutes later, I get a phone call from my grandfather. And my grandfather tells me on the phone that I would like to apologize for everything I've done for the last 9-10 months. I want you to know that I want to restart, I want to rebuild, and next time we talk, let's reconnect and let's try to rebuild our connection. And that's exactly what happened. My grandfather and I started talking again. We started rebuilding. We started coming closer. So much so that my grandfather, unfortunately now his health is stopping him. But for the past 3 or 4 years, my grandparents have been coming every Friday night to our house for a Friday night meal, as well as my grandmother has been lighting Shabbos candles every week for the last 3-4 years. And my father, who is the son of this grandfather in the story, my father is actually completely observant now. And my mother as well, with all the kosher issues that we've had and all the issues that we had with me trying to keep kosher, my mother about 2.5 years ago finally koshered her kitchen just for myself and for my wife and future children to enjoy. And so it's a really, really special blessing. And I think that this is really the idea of this podcast. The idea of lechatchila riber. The idea of sometimes in life when we have challenges, God asks us, we have 2 options. You could either try to dig through the garbage that you're going through, or you could try to pick yourself up to a higher plane. And I think that what I've seen in my life and what I want to give to all of the listeners here is the idea and the concept of allowing yourself to see yourself in a higher way. Instead of looking at yourself how you look at yourself, look at yourself how God looks at you. Look at yourself from your godly potential, from what you have, from what you can achieve in this world. And when you look at yourself like that, from your talents, from a perspective of love, from a perspective of care, when you look at yourself like that, that really is the secret to all of the accomplishments in your life. And I want to just share something very personal as well, that as I'm sure it's not known, but about 9 months ago, my wife and I unfortunately lost our first child, which was very, very rough for us. You can imagine what it's like to lose a child in general. Imagine what it's like to lose your first child. Many emotions go over in someone's head, and people could get knocked down. It's one of those challenges where if people don't overcome it, you could be living in it forever. We all know that person that experienced this kind of challenge, and they're never going to get over it. But the one thing that I've seen together with my wife, and we've worked on this together through therapy, through self-discussion, through self-work, and through the studying of Chassidus and the concept of lechatchila riber, is that we've seen in our own life this idea of being able to pick yourself up. And right after this happened to us, about 3.5 months later, right after this terrible tragedy happened in our life, we picked ourselves up and we moved on shlichus. Because the way to combat negativity and traumas and all these things is to do lechatchila riber. Pick yourself up, go on shlichus, start spreading light to others. When you pick yourself up, even when it's rough, even when there's no reason, even when all of those around you say, take time, mourn, grief, and there's definitely room for that as well. As we know, there's the 5 stages of grief, which everyone has to go through when they experience a loss. But at the same time, to pick yourself up and put yourself in a place where you are now able to impact others. And so if I could give over any message, obviously, I'm sure if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions, Chaim. But if I can give over a message, the message is this podcast, Lechatchila Riber. I can't believe that I'm talking now and there's not millions of viewers on this podcast. Lechatchila Riber, this is the podcast that needs the views. The podcast which is gives so much strength and so much energy, and this belief in others, and this is what people believed in me, and I want to give this over to all the listeners that believe in yourself and you could do it. L'chaim.
Very raw, very real. Wow.
Thank you. Yeah. Pleasure. It's actually my first public forum of sharing what happened to us. But,
Erstens, first of all, just to get some context, like a lot of times Bachrim or young teenagers, they think they're like, what's their goal in life? When do they know they make it? That they made it in life? Is they go into the NBA, if they come into professional athletes in basketball and they follow sports and they know their names and they're all that's their life, and they have a dream like if only they make the NBA, then they're like then their life would have been worth living, not worth living, but Now, first of all, what was that stake? I'm getting into detail. What was that stake? Like what promises? What was your status of tennis? Like where were you going, and how did you make that shift to to go to yeshiva? What was that? Where were you going from? And this more about that.
It's actually interesting that you bring up that point. That most Bachrim look at it like the biggest thing is to go into the NBA, or I know that I'm currently we're on shlichus now at a school that's in the top 10 party schools in the U.S. People literally come to the school for the parties. And on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, there's no access to any students because they're all drunk and passed out at all local bars. But so students, a lot of the Bachrim look up to me. Wow, you're at such a party school, etc. It's actually, I always just think it's funny because all you have to do is have a couple conversations with these students. I always tell people if there's ever Bachrim that think that that the college students have it better, come for a year under a shliach. Go on Mecca shlichus for a year at a college campus. All you have to do is meet some of these students and hear about their life and their social anxieties, and you'll be running back to yeshiva. but it's without going into bigger detail. I'm assuming this is a clean podcast, so we're not going to go into detail of what kind of anxieties that they suffer through. But just to share a little bit myself to address the second part of your question, that with regards to my tennis was getting very serious. But after I won the LA City Championships, I was getting very serious offers to play D1 tennis at UCLA. That was my biggest offer. Obviously, I could have basically gone anywhere because UCLA was offering me, and UCLA is number 1 and 2 in the nation. So I could have basically gone anywhere I wanted on a tennis scholarship. As well as UCLA offered me $160,000 to come play tennis for them, which was definitely for me was a huge accomplishment. A handwritten letter from UCLA. It was very powerful. I remember the day we got in the mail. I was all excited, and so UCLA was there. Also academically, I was very good. So basically, any school would take me as well. So that's kind of where it was. I wasn't at that point sure if I was going to go pro. Definitely D1 tennis was in my very near future if I had continued to go on with my tennis career. I did use my tennis for other things after I became more religious, but after I became more frum. But I used it for other things, like to beat people and put on film with them if they lost and that kind of thing.
When they lost.
But what?
When they lost.
Of course. But overall I was headed in that direction. And really what got me is because I always get this question. The question I always get is, why can't you be a frum tennis player? Why can't you could be a frum NBA player? Why can't you be a frum MLB player? And the reality is that, number one, it's very hard. And that's the reason why you don't find many frum MLB players, frum NBA players, any of these sports. You don't find any of these religious players, frum players, because it's very hard to have a lifestyle of Yiddishkeit together with a lifestyle of sports, which is many hours time consuming. I used to practice tennis for 3 hours a day and then an hour in the gym every single day, 6 days a week. The only day I didn't practice was Shabbos, and on Motzei Shabbos I used to play tennis for an hour just to make sure that I got my at least 1 hour of tennis in every day. So that was a very strict regimen, and at that point I was still not pro. Imagine if I was pro, how many more hours I'd be playing and how many more days, and a lot of the tournaments fall out on Shabbat. And so it's very hard to be a fully frum professional sports player. That's number one. Number two is, for me, I really connected, as much as many Bachrim don't connect with Yiddishkeit and yeshiva. For me, and because of my connection, like I said, the fact that I was able to talk to God, and I feel like the reason why Bachrim a lot of times don't connect with yeshiva is because they don't have a relationship with God. They don't really have an understanding of who God is. They sat and learned Gemara their whole life, and they don't know God. There's no God. There's Hashem, what it says in the books, but who's God in your life? Who's God that you talk to? Who's God that goes through things with you and that you have to process and relate to? And I think that for me personally, because I have my journey, I really had an understanding of obviously not that I understood anything about God, but I had an understanding at least that there is a God and that I wanted to connect to him. And because I had this desire to connect to God, I really felt that I wanted to be in yeshiva. Yeshiva was something that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the fact that it was the coolest thing in the world. I remember the first day I came to yeshiva, I was amazed. Usually in public school, you have 6 periods, and they're all periods that half the classes you don't even want to take. You just have to take them because they're standardized and you must take them in order to pass your classes. And the other 3 you kind of like, but it depends on your teacher. And I came to Jewish school and I was like, yeshiva is amazing. There's like 6 periods and it's all Torah. It's like when I was in public school, I would always bring my chayenu and learn in Spanish class. I would learn my chayenu. It wasn't Spanish, but it was close. So that was my involvement. And finally here, it's like I get credit for learning Torah. I've never had that before. Like there's a class where like you could actually learn Torah, and that's your class. And I remember for me it was very, very powerful to be in yeshiva, and it was something I wanted to at least try out for a little bit of time. And once that kind of happened, so it pushed off my college by a little bit, and then eventually kind of just switched, and I ended up pursuing my love for Yiddishkeit. And I'm very happy with my decision because now I have the incredible schus and merit of being here at KU with the Jewhawks. And I guess God wanted to make sure I still stay with a good sports school because Kansas is known as the number 1 and number 2 basketball school in the country. So God still put me in a place where I could still be into sports. But I definitely am honored, and I don't. And it's funny. I've been asked before if I regret my decision, and I think the premise of the question is hilarious. that someone asks you if you regret your decision. In order for someone to regret a decision, that means that they can't go back on their decision. What people don't understand, and I think that everyone has free choice. I don't have to be religious right now. What do you mean if I regret it? If I regret it, I wouldn't be doing it right now. It's what I think a lot of people, the way they grew up, especially in from families, it's almost like a no choice, and like, you never choose God. Like, what do you mean? Like, do you regret it? Like, I don't regret anything. Right. If I regret it, I could drop it. I can go to McDonald's right now. It's something that I'm actively choosing every day. I'm actively choosing to do it because it's something that's important to me, something that's special. And I hope that the Bachrim who hear this podcast, or whoever the audience is, could receive some of the specialty that Yiddishkeit has. And there is. And just because you can't find it, and just because you don't feel it at the moment, doesn't mean it's not there. And it's hard to not define yourself by your lack of feeling for Yiddishkeit, or your lack of feeling for Hashem. But that's why we keep trying. We keep trying, and thank God there's people like Chaim Kozliner in this world who are helping here to guide Bacher and to guide people, to bring them closer to Yiddishkeit, to help them find Hashem in their life. I think that's what you're doing here. That's what this podcast is all about. So,
well, thank you. Is I want to get back into what like, how did you go to yeshiva? Did you finish high school? Went to yeshiva? What was that transition like? How did that?
So,
what did you decide? Yeah, how did the whole process happen?
So when I finished high school, when I started becoming from. By the way, I'm asking just for clarity. Am I should I be using the word from? Is that too much of a religious word? I'm not. I don't know who this is catered for. You tell me.
Fine. Yeah, I can say from. Yeah.
I don't mind using the word religious if that's easier.
It doesn't matter. I'm saying both.
But so when I was becoming more observant, I was my CTeen trip was in the summer before 11th grade in high school, and when I came back for high school, I went through that year. I was actually super successful in tennis that year. That was when I won the LACD championships, and that's when my biggest accolades were in tennis. And following that year, I had gone for a summer to try out yeshiva, taste of yeshiva. And I really enjoyed it. I wanted to go back the following year. Unfortunately, my parents wouldn't let me. And so I ended up doing a half and half. I ended up kind of blackmailing my high school and telling them that if they don't let me do my high school online, I'm not going to play tennis for them. So I basically told my high school I'm not coming physically to school anymore. And I'm only going to do it online just to get the credits because my parents wanted me to get a high school diploma. And I did the rest of the time I was doing yeshiva. It's actually interesting that my first yeshiva I ever applied to was not a Chabad yeshiva. And I was actually not accepted. I was told that I'm way too far behind and I'll never catch up. That's what I was told. Based on my knowledge, they told me that you're way too far behind. Our students, our Bachrim here are way too advanced. And you will never catch up to them. So, thank God I didn't end up there. So, but I ended up in a Chabad yeshiva, and that's kind of how my journey started. That first year, my 12th grade year, I was half and half day in yeshiva, half day in public school, and then the following year is when I started my full-on yeshiva regimen, and I started teaching myself Hebrew and Yiddish, and eventually I was able to learn. Within a few months, I was caught up to my class and learning just like everybody else around me. And followed by that, I had gone to yeshiva in New York, in Olatera, and then spent 2 years, one of those years with the amazing host of this incredible podcast. And that was one of the best years of my life, not only because Chaim Kozliner was there, but for many reasons, it was one of the best years of my life. But and then I spent years teaching in many yeshivas all around the U.S. So that's a little bit of the yeshiva journey.
Have you ever met the rabbi that didn't accept you? Ever spoke to him? You ever had any interactions?
I once saw him on the street. I had a debate to come up to him and tell him that I made it. But I think I made it. But it's very funny. Most people at this point can't even tell that I grew up not from, but it's definitely shows. When you put your mind to something, same thing with learning Yiddish, same thing with learning Hebrew. It was languages I came in. I didn't know a single word when I started becoming religious. I didn't know how to read. I didn't know Aleph Beis. I didn't know anything about Judaism and about reading Hebrew. And I was able to teach myself, and to the point that actually last year before I moved, I was actually teaching Satmar. I was teaching in Satmar. I was teaching in Yiddish to Satmar children, and
Wow.
so that was definitely a lot of fun. So yeah, yep.
That was just when you were in CTeen, did you know like how to put on tefillin and stuff? Like, did you like what was your like
So when I was in CTeen, the first time that I didn't know how to put on film when I came to CTeen. So when I was on CTeen, the first day when I came, was given a tefillin from my local shliach here, Rabbi Eli Rifkin, from Northridge, California, to borrow and to use. So when I came on CTeen, I brought it with me, and I wasn't intending on using it. But if they asked me to use it, I would use it. One of the things I made up when I went on CTeen in general is that I'm not gonna fight them. If they ask me to do Judaism, I'll do Judaism. I'm not gonna go on a Jewish camp and then fight them on Judaism for the whole 2 weeks. It's actually funny. Just recently, I found my voicemail, the first ever voicemail I sent my parents from CTeen Erev Shabbos, telling them I'm not going to use my phone for the whole I'm not going to use my phone for the whole Shabbos. I was telling them, yeah, there's this thing called Shabbat, and you don't use your phone, and it was very funny to hear myself talking like that. But so I came on CTeen with my tefillin, and I remember the first day they came up to me and asked me if I want to put on tefillin. So I said, sure. I'll put on tefillin. So then I had my tefillin with me. They said, do you need help? So maybe it's because of my complex of always being good at things and being good at sports that I was kind of embarrassed to say no. So I told them, I said, you know what? I got it. I can do this. How hard could this be already? Whatever. You wrap it here, you put it on your head, whatever. So I started wrapping it on my hand. I started looking around, like, how hard could this be already? So I wrapped some stuff on my hand. Okay, I probably did like 85 wraps on my hand. Then I put it on my head. Who knows which direction it was facing. And after I put it on myself, I noticed that everybody's holding the Siddur, the prayer book, and everyone's shaking. So I did that also. I put it on. I started shaking back and forth. And so as I was shaking back and forth, about 10 minutes later, I actually think that my Siddur was upside down at that point. I was just like literally just looking around, shaking. Eventually, my counselor comes back to me and looks at me, and I see like something's up. He looks at me like, oh, what's going on there, man? Something's going on. So I said, hey, what's going on? How are you? And he said, can I fix something quickly? I said, yeah, sure, 100%. I never mess up on this stuff, but go ahead, you could fix it. Mind me, this is one of my first times ever putting on film in my life. And so he comes up to me and he starts looking and he says, I think you made a mistake. I think over here you put the head tefillin on your hand. And I don't know what happened, but I ended up putting the head tefillin on my hand. And somehow, more confusing to me is how I got the hand tefillin on my head. And the strap was literally like under my feet. It was a wild story, and he ended up fixing my tefillin. And long story, but it's part of my journey. Part of the journey. Definitely helped me learn. It was a good learning moment on how to put on tefillin.
Wow. Yes, I want to ask you, what was like the main? If it was one that could like what was your decision to become religious? Was it like what was there one that could like? Had you like a lot of times people go to the experience of summer camp and they move on. Like what was the one that could that made you decide that this is what I want in my life? What was that? Was it the kids? Was it the counselor? Was it the Abishter? What was like one that could like because of this? I'm going full force. You have to go against the tide. You have to go against your family. You have to go against your whole school. You have to push a change. What was like that one that could that gave you that push? Like that kept you going. sure,
It's a
at
good
different
question.
stages, but yeah, but
So there's really two pivotal moments. One that was the fact that I really saw the happiness that Yiddishkeit brought. And it was a happiness that I've never seen in my life before. And that was really the beginning of my journey. And that was what was most inspiring from CTeen, was seeing Yidden, my counselors, Chassidim, who were literally just happy to be alive. They were happy, and not just happy in a overall, they felt good about themselves on the inside. They were happy, bubbly, jumpy, excited about life, excited about their life, excited. They felt like they had the best life in the world. And I've never seen a person like that. I've met the top tennis players in the world. I've been at these places. I've been at all these tournaments. I've gotten autographs from every big tennis player you could think of. I have autographs from all the big baseball players you could think of. And I've met some of these people, and you don't see that. You don't see that happiness. With a chassid who's happy, who loves his life, you see a happiness that you don't see on the biggest athletes in the world. And that happiness was something that I wanted. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want this. And this is just amazing. So that one nakuda is what ultimately pushed me in the beginning to change my life. Is that I want this, and I know I'll get it. I know that they have something that I could access. And that was their whole point, that you have access to this. Every one of us has access to this happiness. We just have to know how to tap into it. And we have to use our resources and our friends and our mashpim and things like that to help us tap in. And one other pivotal moment that I had was actually on the CTeen Shabbaton. I remember it was Shabbos, and we were in 770 in the Rebbe Shul, and the Torah reading came out. And the Torah was being read, and I remember a certain Aliyah, there was a certain guy there who got an Aliyah. And when I was looking, in general, I was very confused by the Torah readings in 770, because after the guy finishes the blessings, he suddenly ducks as if he's about to get missile launched from all sides. And people start chucking bags at him, which I thought was extremely rude, especially because the guy doesn't look like he wants it. And then someone had to explain to me that, no, it's okay. And he actually gave out those bags himself before he went up there. And so that was a little interesting. But there was a guy who got an Aliyah who my counselor had explained to me at the time that this guy also became religious when he was 16, and just like me. And he was now fully ready to get married. It was the week before his wedding. It was his Ufr Aliyah. His father was next to him. His father was in a kapata. His father had become religious after him, and his father was fully in the full-on religious garb, and they were together. And I remember after the Aliyah, how they both stood there in the middle of 770, in the middle of thousands of people, and started crying together, hugging and crying. This was obviously a very emotional moment, that this guy had become religious and his family had transformed, and this was like the culmination of the entire years of transformation. And I remember for myself looking at this scene and thinking that, wow, that's going to be me. That's what I was looking at, and all I could think about is that I'm going to do this. Because at that point I was debating, maybe I could just be somewhat religious and play professional tennis. Maybe I don't have to go all the way. Maybe I don't need to do it. Am I really going to get there anyways? And this moment is what told me that you could get there all the way. You could make it. And I told myself that day, I'm not stopping till that's me.
wow.
And so these were the two moments in my life, the two things. One of them is the kuda, the other one's a moment, but two things that really defined and pushed my entire journey. So
Wow. So now making full circle, how does it feel to be on campus now in Shlichus? Going full circle now, inspiring these same kind of kids. What's it like, especially right now with the Israel going on with anti-Semitism? I saw there was a anti-Semitism, some kind of vandalism by you guys. Even at some point,
Wow.
How is this
Chaim,
feeling of being proud? What's like the
you really keep up with what's going on in Kansas. Wow. You saw there was a vandalism here. But so yeah, it's the biggest reward in the world. It's the biggest reward from God, from Hashem, that I put so much effort into my own journey, and now I get to see other people and I get to help them in their journey and get to hear them and go and the way that they're growing through things and processing things. And obviously after October 7th, everything changed, but everything changed in a way actually for the better. I've never seen so many Jews inspired. We had a prayer session right after October 7th with 350 students. And just to put that in perspective, there's only about 750 Jews here at KU. So 350 out of 750 is almost half the Jewish population of the school showed up to this prayer session. And this is the reality you see here, that students are willing to fight against anti-Semitism. We have currently 2 students wearing their kippahs loud and proud on campus in their classes. We have 5 students who are putting on tefillin every single day. We have 1 student who decided to recently take on Shabbat and get himself involved. And it's an honor. It's a pleasure to be able to take my experience, my background, and I really do understand what they're going through and the fear that they feel. My wife and I were not ready to become therapists, but October 7th turned my wife and I into world-renowned therapists. The only difference is we don't get the nice paychecks that the therapists get. But we turned into therapists for these students, and we're honored to be there for them. And I know that now it's been winter break here at KU. We have had some reports of vandalism, like you said. Thank God we're not like the campuses like Columbia and other campuses where there's actually been physical violence to Jewish people. Overall here, things have been pretty peaceful. There's been some Israeli flags torn down, but overall it's been well. And now at winter break, my wife had encouraged 2 of the girls to go to seminary for winter break. And even though I didn't take a part, but my wife was the one who sent them. But my wife is getting videos from them saying how much they're loving it and enjoying it from seminary. And you just look with such a smile that thank Hashem that I have this opportunity. I have this opportunity to give another Jew the happiness that I felt with Judaism. And you hear it in their voice notes. You hear their happiness. You hear their enjoyment. And I'm just lucky that we have this. We're very fortunate that we have this this ability to give that happiness to others. And I remember when I was in yeshiva in Toronto, and maybe Chaim could attest to this, that I told Chaim this also when we were in Toronto, that the one thing that people need, especially Bachrim, even Bachrim, they need to know that Judaism is awesome.
Oh.
I think I told you this in Toronto, and I think that I remember you saying it, but this is the one thing that I even try to give to Bachrim in yeshiva. Judaism is awesome. Being a chassid is awesome. And take that happiness and live with it. And I've seen many Bachrim who are still connected and involved because of that happiness that we as shluchim were able to give them when they were in yeshiva in the sifta. So, yeah.
Yeah, two more questions. So how could you how's that Amuna piece fit together with awesomeness? Like I'm sure a lot of times using big geschmack. When you get hit, how does that go together?
Right. So I'm not gonna say it's easy. It's not easy. It's a constant aveda, and I'm not gonna say that I've had great days. You know, I have this shtick that whenever people ask me how I'm doing, I always say I'm awesome. The reason I do it is not because I'm trying to lie to anybody, but because sometimes when you say you're awesome, you actually make yourself feel more awesome. It's actually brought down to mental health. That the way you speak to yourself is actually, in a way, can actually produce real emotions and real feelings inside yourself. But it hasn't always been easy. When you get hit and your emunah gets questioned, and this feeling of Hashem's got your back, and suddenly you see that Hashem doesn't have your back. And the Hashem who you thought was loving and caring and awesome and protecting is no longer loving, caring, awesome, and protecting. And I'm not going to say that I haven't struggled with that. But the reality is that I use, when I speak to people like you, and when I speak on podcasts, and when I speak at Chabad about what we went through, I use it as almost a reminder to myself about the truth. Because sometimes we can get into slumps and we can think that God hates us. But we have to remind ourselves of the reality. The reality is that God is here for you. God loves you. And it's not easy. Like I said, sometimes we can have a father, and sometimes the father does things you don't understand. And the example I always give is that if your father was picking you up from the airport, and he was supposed to pick you up at 5:00, and you were standing in the pouring rain at 5:00 outside, and he's not there, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and only at 5:30 he shows up. You're drenched, and you're like, Dad, what is this, bro? I've been standing here for half an hour. I'm drenched. What are you doing? And your father said, listen, I couldn't come at 5:00, but I can't tell you why. But I'm telling you, it's for your good. I'm telling you, you would be happy to know the reason. Now, two things. Number one, most of us would believe our father. Unless obviously a person doesn't have a good relationship with their father, then this is not a good example. You have to put it in a different relationship. But a person who has a good relationship with their father, obviously you believe your father, that it's good for you. And even if you don't know the reason, you know that some things happen to you, challenge happen to you, but it's good for you. It's okay. God as your father has a reason. He has a reason, and just because you don't know it doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean that God's trying to screw you. That's number one. Number two is, just because your father was late the first time, do you think the next time you land at the airport, your father would be half an hour late? Why would he be half an hour late the next time? The first time he was late for a specific reason. And he said, I can't tell you why, but it's a specific reason. Why would you suddenly think for future occurrences that your father would be late? In the same way, if you have a setback in life, if you have a tragedy, if you have a trauma that you experience, why does that mean that God is going to continue to traumatize your life? There was a certain reason why something had to happen to you in your life. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying this for anyone who experiences anything. Children who come from a family that they feel like they grew up with a worse family situation than others. I always used to tell myself that. Why did God put me in this family? Just because God throws one trauma at you or one tragedy at you does not mean that he's throwing other things at you. Does not mean that he's interested in messing you over forever. He had reasons for the different things that he's throwing at you. But that doesn't mean that your life is over. And honestly, the more I work on myself, the more the students connect with me. Because I think that what students really want, they want someone real. They want someone who goes through things like them, who processes things like them. And in a way, I relate to all those Bachrim and all those people that struggle with why they were chosen in that family or why they were given what they were given. Although now, personally, I'm very happy with the family I was given. On a very serious note, I'm very, very happy and honored. And honestly, at this point, I can very clearly say that if I would redo it, I would not pick another family. And so this is exactly the way that I would want my life to be. And but at the same time, I understand everyone who's still going through it and still processing. But you have to, it takes constant work. Emunah might be something which we all have, but bitachon is something which needs work. If you really want to trust in God, you can have faith in God deep down. You really want to trust in God in a real way. You want to feel God's presence. That comes with work. It's not a freebie. It's not a freebie, but it's worth it. It's something that's worth it. If you put effort into it, you will get there. And that's all I could say. For me, my biggest thing when Judaism got hard, and this is what I tell Bachrim too, is that life is not easy, man. And Yiddishkeit's not easy. But who said things in life are supposed to be easy? Things in life are not always easy, you know? The best things in life, marriage. Marriage is, the ultimate epitome of the best thing in life. Marriage is one of the hardest things you could do for yourself. If you're really not looking for life challenges, stay celibate your entire life. Because this way you could live as a bacher and eat grilled cheese sandwiches in your apartment and not have to deal with a wife bugging you. But if you really want goodness and greatness in your life, we take on challenges because this is what life brings us. So I'm not sure if that really answered the question.
Yeah,
But
Very, very
yeah.
interesting perspective. Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, last question I wanted to ask you. So you're in Kiel last year. Just wondering, what's the motive? Like, people looking for shlichus, or what's the market like? What's the mindset like? What's going on in people's minds? What's like the how do you figure out, what kind of, how do people figure out what they want and if they're on the right track? Do they know what they want? What's like any words to that?
Talking about Bacher now? Or you talking about Younger Light?
So you're like, they have a mindset of shlichus. What does that mean? How long do they wait for? Are there places? Are there not places? Is it connections? Is it not connections? Is it like what's just typical guy looking for shlichus? What's the any thoughts? Will you tell someone?
Well, my I have a couple of thoughts on this. My first thought on this is that obviously, if a person wants shlichus, there's always shlichus. Just to answer that question, is there mekemis? There's always mekemis. There's never going to be a time where there's no shlichus mekemis. I personally think that this thing that there's no shlichus options is false. It just you haven't found them yet. There is always place. I'll give you a very perfect example. My wife and I were very set on campus. So to speak, we're lowering our pool. We are closing our pool in much more than your average younger man. We weren't open to community shlichus. We weren't open to CTeen shlichus. We weren't open to kid shlichus. We were only looking for campus, and we still found. And God willing, next year this is only a 1-year internship here at KU, but God willing, next year we're already looking into other options for next year, for campus as well. And there are already 3, 4, 5 options that we're looking into, and this is just within campus itself. But it takes a couple things. Number one, it takes Hashem's help and Hashem's guidance, and pray to God and write to the Rebbe. That's number one. Number two is that if you want something, you will get it. Fact in life. You don't need connections. As much as connections are helpful, and that is nice, connections do help, but if you really want something, you will get it. My wife and I want campus shlichus. We wanted to be here. We're here. I wanted to be from. I wanted to be just like every other Lubavitcher, and I'm there. And it all ain't a davar aim lifnei haratzon. Anything that you really want, you'll get. So for a younger man who's looking for shlichus, number one, you have to really want this bad. Because if you don't want it bad, you're not going to get it. Because you're right, it is harder now. There is not so many There's not as many places open. But if you want it, you'll get it. If you want shlichus and you're not gonna allow your life to go, you're not gonna live a life that's not shlichus, you will find the shlichus. Everyone will find the shlichus if they really want it. The question is how badly you want it. And if you don't know what kind of shlichus you're looking for, I always encourage younger light, and I did this myself. Speak to a professional or speak to someone on shlichus and try to get guidance from someone as to what kind of shlichus you should be looking for. Many people, you sit and talk to them, they don't really know what they're looking for in terms of shlichus. And it's very hard because, you're looking for a shlichus. Do I really want to do this? Do I really not want to do this? What really matters to me? Could I work for someone? Could I not work for someone? And these are questions which you could answer. And so this way you can have a more targeted goal with regards to you're looking for shlichus. And that's my wife and I, we invested money into it. There are professionals who will do it for money. Therefore, they will sit down with you and they will have an hour-long session. They will talk through your priorities and talk through what matters to you. And together with you, come to a place where you can understand what you're looking for in your life, what you're looking for as far as your shlichus. And in that case, it makes it easier for you to search because now you know what to tell people. Now you know how to market yourself, how to ask how to do things. But I always say, and the younger light that always tell me that I'm not paying for that kind of stuff because sometimes it can get quite expensive. It could get to $100 an hour at some points. The person that we worked with charged us $100 an hour. I always tell them it's a famous thing in Vegas. They say in Vegas you got to pay to play. My friend, you want to play, you got to pay. If you want to play, you got to pay. It's if you want to be good at something, you got to be willing to do anything. If you want shlichus, you will find shlichus. The question is, what's your limit? Is your limit money? Is your limit interest? Is your limit not willing to cold call people. If you're willing to push hard and do anything you need to do, I would be surprised. I think the Rebbe's pasuk. I mean, that's not the Rebbe's pasuk, but the pasuk that the Rebbe always kocht in Yiddishkeit matzasa timing. This is the exact nowadays is when you can really live this pasuk. That if you have real yagia, and I'm not saying it's going to come automatically. It's not. I'm not saying that it's going to come up on the first option, but I would be surprised to find a younger man who's not on shlichus that they would die hard for this, and so not sure if that answers your question, but
yeah. So let's wrap this up. Anything else you wanted to add that we didn't mention? Just we cover everything.
Just wanted to put out there that if anybody, whoever is listening to this, or if anybody is listening to this, or whoever is listening, if they want to reach out to me personally, that they should know that they're comfortable to do so, and I'm happy to speak to them. And one of the things that I have gained recently since I've experienced this tragedy is two things. Number one, I've gained a certain sense of sensitivity, a certain sense of a lot of real understanding of a lot of other challenges that people go through. Because before this, as much as people went through challenges, I couldn't fully relate. I'd never been through something huge. And this definitely gave me a certain level of sensitivity that I've never had before. Another thing it gave me is also the ability to square people in the face and tell them how it is. So, if anybody listening is interested, it has any questions or ever want to, needs anything, they're welcome to reach out. And I'm happy to help in a respectful, gentle, but also very honest way. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Or
you can reach out to the host of this podcast, who's an incredible mashpia and friend and really a Jew who loves God, and someone who, to be honest, I know you're not supposed to talk about someone in front of them, but it's okay. I can always cancel your camera so I can't see you. But the truth is that you're someone who always has a smile on his face, and I'm sure that you have your challenges just like we all do. But somehow you have a smile, and honestly, I myself would love to know how you do it. But maybe you could pass some of the juice over here, But it's really amazing and inspiring, and honestly, it's an honor just to, besides for having this chus of being on the Lechatchila Rebbe, your podcast. It's just an honor to talk to you, B'chlal. So
wow.
Anyways,
yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
So I guess we'll put in the show notes. I guess if you email something, we'll write it down.
You can either do that, or you can write my phone number. I'm happy if people want to contact me via phone, either one. So, but yeah, I'm honored. I'm honored to be part of this podcast. So
yeah, very kind of you for the message, for that everyone can reach out. Very kind of you for putting that out there. And yeah, really appreciate your time. Our guest will be forever grateful for your time, all the wisdom, the chayis, the vibe, the pashits. We went through a lot of topics, very real, and roller coasters, pashits. A lot of great taken.
God willing, we'll get to fly down the host of this podcast to Kansas, maybe. Well, but that would be a pleasure.
Don't forget to put a 5-star rating, kapashit.
And I don't know how to access it. How do I access the podcast?
We'll figure it out. Put all platforms. We'll find all platforms. Right, I mentioned when it comes out. And feel free to reach out. Take a look. Lev has a website. The tennis rabbi.
Oh wow!
Looking for if you enjoyed this.
Wow!
If you enjoyed the this podcast, want to bring him to speak to your next event. You have Lev. Not just that, you have Lev's wife also speaks. You have Lev and his wife. She has her own journey. How she came from, I think, also through CTeen.
This is actually a little bit of a of a disclaimer, but she's actually the keynote speaker this year at the banquet, at the Kinnus
Kidding me.
HaShluchos. I'm not.
Wow.
So it's a very, very special honor
Wow.
to be able to watch her live from Kansas as she rocks the house. So
Crazy. Yeah, and don't forget to join the Daily Juice. We're gonna put the link.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Daily Juice of daily inspiration, hundreds of viewers listening to Geschmack and Yonim every single day. And last but not least, I want to thank our dear producer, Mendel Garfinkel, for setting this up. Yeshiva. Yeah, he has his own daily weekly Dratero. It's called the Meaningful Moments.org. You can check it out. He has every single week Geschmack and Dratero. He records it. Check that out and subscribe to Push It. And we'll end off this. That Nakuda. Don't wait. It's one last thing I want to end off with is that we have to realize we can't wait till we have certainty, till things make sense, till I'm not scared anymore. We have to just decide, I want to get something in my life. This is my mission. I'm doing it. And I'm still scared to do it, Yeah, that's a mindset. People wait till it's perfect, till they have certainty. We have to decide. Till I did, we just jump it through the fear. It doesn't matter. And So the Kudo, it's been a pleasure spending time with you.
You're the producer, the producer of the show.
I get to talk to you, Push It.
Of course.
The services,
Wow. The producer of this show has a beautiful website.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at it right now. It's beautiful.
Wow.
I just you gotta get his face on here. Gotta get his
Get his face on here.
Anyways.
Okay. Final time, L'chaim. Chedish. All the best.
Yeah. I'll give Chedish.
Enjoy. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Thank you for listening to the Lechatchila Ariber podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Spotify. This podcast is produced by meaningfulmoment.org. To receive weekly Dvar Torah emails delivered straight to your inbox, visit meaningfulmoment.org/subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode, rate us 5 stars and stay tuned for more episodes.